So as soon as somebody has a clear shot, I encourage them to take that shot and neutralize the threat.
A sniper sets a fire to ambush firefighters in Idaho. I walk through the horrific incident and where the case stands now. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. It was a beautiful day in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho on Sunday. People who live near Canfield Mountain, they love it there because there are trails and they walk out of their homes and they see this beautiful scenery. Sunday was almost picture perfect until a call came in for a fire on the mountain. Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County firefighters raced to the scene to put out that fire. Those firefighters, they were just doing their job, but they had no idea that fire, according to the sheriff, was a setup. Listen to the scanner traffic from Broadcastify.
Some law enforcement right now, there's an active shooter zone. They're shot. BC3's down, BC1's down. Everybody's shot up here. Law enforcement, code 3 now up here. 551, 10 or 14 up here. Stop. Get out of the way. 10 or 14, engine push 551. Do not come up here.
You can hear the sheer panic in the voice of that firefighter. They were taking fire while they were trying to fight a fire. 3 of them were wounded.
We now have 2 deaths. We have an unknown amount of casualties. We still have civilians that are coming off of that mountain. We might have civilians that are stuck or in shock on that mountain. So this is a very, very fresh situation. We are actively taking sniper fire as we speak. This is an active situation. We have multiple agencies that are on scene from local and federal authorities, and we are prepared to neutralize this suspect who is currently actively shooting at public safety personnel. We are prepared to neutralize this suspect as quickly as possible. And that's really all that we know as of right now.
This, of course, was very early on in the case, and at that point, 2 firefighters had been killed, one from Kootenai County and another from Coeur d'Alene.
Right now, we're developing a plan to be able to suppress these individuals' firefighting capability. And when we get that under control, when we have an opportunity to suppress that, then we will continue our removing of people who are on the mountain, who are on for a hike, or public safety personnel, or people who live on the backside of the mountain.
Sheriff Bob Norris said at the time that the suspect or suspects were firing high-powered rifles, and first responders were actively taking fire. And as you heard, it wasn't just fire personnel, it was people using the trails, civilians. Norris spoke about the worst-case scenario.
I would encourage all of you to tell people to stay away from the area. Do not come to the area. Stay away from the area. This is going to be, if these individuals are not neutralized quickly, this is going to be likely a multi-day operation.
This was as serious as it gets. Norris said he was even in contact with FBI Director Kash Patel, who offered resources. People who live around the mountain were told to shelter in place.
Well, they're heavy brush, well prepared. So yeah, they're blending in with their surroundings. And I'm hoping that somebody has a clear shot and is able to neutralize, because they are not at this point in time showing any evidence of wanting to surrender. So as soon as somebody has a clear shot, I encourage them to take that shot and neutralize the threat.
Hours passed, and then a little bit after midnight Eastern time, there was an update from the sheriff.
We had a cell phone activation that was in the same spot since about 3:16, and that it was in the same area, and we honed in on that cell phone, and we saw that there was a male, appeared to be deceased, with a weapon nearby. So we have currently 1 dead shooter. Based on the preliminary investigation that was being conducted, keep in mind we had a fire that was rapidly it was approaching the body, so we had to scoop up that body, and we had to transport that body to a different location.
This is something that we don't train for. It's not something we expect. It's not something our firefighters should have to deal with. In this situation, they were called to a grass fire, which is already something that we're very heightened and are anxious about this time of year. And they were doing everything the way they were supposed to do it.
This is a Law and Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to these outcomes? Morgan & Morgan is stepping in to fight to hold food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for families that deserve justice. So if your child under the age of 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan that QR code on your screen to learn more. All right, so I want to bring in somebody to talk about this terrifying situation that, thank God, is now over. She is Tracy Walder, a former FBI agent and CIA officer. Tracy, I know you and I kind of were talking about this last night a little bit. Walk me through how you tackle something like this, because we've heard of this happening in other places where firefighters, unfortunately, or first responders are lured to a location, and then they're lured there just so they can be ambushed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Angenette. Thank you for having me. This actually has happened before in 2012. So a little bit ago, where firefighters were lured to a location and were shot at. In my opinion, this is someone that has some kind of a message that they wanted to send. And there's some kind of, I don't mean to overanalyze it, but some kind of symbolism involved. And in my opinion, that's probably what the FBI and local law enforcement are looking for right now. Because yes, we know that this was a lone shooter now at this point, but the reality is these ideas that these people get and the motivation that they get to carry out these attacks don't exist in a vacuum. And so I'd be very interested to know who this person was talking to on social media, via text, those kinds of things. That's going to take a bit, obviously, to go through, but I'm sure the FBI is being utilized to help out.
And the sheriff said yesterday during one of his press conferences that he had been in touch with Kash Patel, the FBI director. I mean, in the heat of this, they didn't know how long this could go on. They didn't know if they were dealing with one shooter or more than one shooter. This was, a rapidly evolving situation. So this could have gone on, he feared, the worst case scenario for many days. And so they've realized now, after it's ended, that they had one person who they believe was targeting the firefighters for whatever reason. What I found interesting and very smart was that they used cell phone technology to pinpoint this person's location. So talk to me about how that would work, because they talked about how you would have people up on the mountain walking around using the trails. I mean, there weren't just, firefighters up there. There were civilians using the mountain, using the trails. There are people who live in the neighborhood.
You're absolutely right. And I think FBI Director Patel was probably thinking about what had happened back in Ruby Ridge back in 1992, where that went on for a few days, and was probably fearful that that's what would happen, which is why he called in basically SWAT HRT from the Salt Lake City office, which is the largest sort of big office from that area. But in terms of using that cell phone technology, that is a tool that the FBI has. So they were definitely brought in to do that in a expedited manner in this situation, because what you don't want is sort of an all-out shootout kind of a situation. And if no one has eyes on this target, which is my guess is they probably didn't for some time as the individual was up in the mountains. And as you mentioned, this is sort of a trailhead that is utilized by the community and by tourists. And you don't want to just have shots flying and inadvertently hit someone, which is actually what happened back in Ruby Ridge, 30 years ago. Now, at this point, as errant shots were hitting people, you don't want that happening. And so utilizing that cell phone technology, this shooter, in my opinion, thought about a lot before they did this. They thought about where to set the fire, how to set the fire, how to lure them, but they did not think about their cell phone and their cell phone data. And the FBI was really able to use that to their advantage and really minimize the amount of casualties.
It makes me wonder, did this person set the fire and just wait for somebody else to call it in? Or did this person set the fire, let it go for a little bit, and then call the call in themselves, reporting the fire, so that then the fire personnel would come to the scene? I mean, we may find out more about this as the investigation goes on. That would be a reason why this person would go up there and leave their cell phone on, have their cell phone on.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And that was my hypothesis. I just try not to speculate, obviously, too much, is that this individual may have called this in at a time that they wanted to call it in, if that makes any sense. Let the fire burn to a point where they felt then they could call it in. And as a result, those 911 operators obviously had the geolocation data of that cell phone. That's what they do when there are emergencies, is try to locate where those emergencies are coming from. So that was my guess as to how that was originally obtained. But again, I don't think the information is out there yet. I don't know. Maybe I'm incorrect about who called 911.
Sure.
Or even multiple people called 911.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of trying to piece it together in my head, obviously, about how somebody would do this and how they would carry it out. You talked about symbolism involved in this. It was targeting firefighters. And so I'm trying to think in my head, what on earth could be the symbolism here? Obviously we would be speculating, but this could be about government. This could be directed specifically just at firefighters. We just don't know, but there will be an investigation to determine motive and who this person was. I mean, they're still, at the time of this recording, they're not releasing this person's name. They have to confirm identity and things of that nature. There's a process here.
That's absolutely right. And it's interesting you brought up in terms of who was the target initially. And there's kind of two schools of thought in my mind on that. I think the first is, were firefighters targeted because this is a larger issue with the law enforcement apparatus as a whole? And did this person know, and it's awful to say, that the firefighters would show up unarmed and therefore be sort of this easier target than police officers who would absolutely show up armed and with bulletproof vests on? That's kind of one school of thought. Is it, law enforcement as a whole? Or is this some issue where, this individual has had some kind of a personal problem with this particular fire department? That, I think, are kind of the two main motivators, in my opinion.
One thing that I've been thinking about, too, is that the fire chief, when he got up there a little after midnight, he said, this has happened in other places. It hasn't happened here. Mm-hmm. I've been to Kootenai County and covering other cases. I mean, this is not, it's a beautiful area of Idaho. It's kind of in the greater Spokane area, kind of that metropolitan area. And this is not a place that I feel like sees a lot of crime, sees things like this. I mean, people move there to raise children, have kind of a nice life, enjoy northern Idaho, the scenery, the beauty of it all. But he said, this is not something we train for. Mm-hmm. We train for this in big cities, but they don't train for this in that part of Idaho. Now that might change because of this. But he said that they don't train for this.
I'm going to be blunt, if I may. I have to be honest in that I'm very surprised that they don't train for this. And let me tell you why. I understand that these events happened a long time ago. And I do believe that most people in northern Idaho do not want these groups of people there. So I want to be careful when I say that. I'm not trying to lump them in. But this is an area. Coeur d'Alene is only about 20 miles-ish or so away from Hayden Lake, which is the center of the Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan names, back in the late 90s, 80s, 70s, and into the 2000s. They are no longer there. So I just want to be very clear about that. And the community as a whole does not want them there under any circumstances. It's very frustrating to see them all get lumped in. I am surprised, based on the issues that they had 20 years ago there, that they actually wouldn't train for a scenario like this. I know that's going to be a controversial statement, but I do think that based on the history of this area, it seems egregious not to train for it, to be completely honest.
That's an interesting point that you make, because you should try to train for everything.
Yes.
And maybe this is a time where they will go back and say, we should have been training for this. And it's interesting you bring up the Aryan, Brotherhood, or I've seen there's been some cases in Idaho where there have been members of that organization charged in that. One, Skylar Mead, he's facing some charges up there for a murder, horrific, of an elderly man. But, that does exist there. So that's a key question here, the training, why they weren't trained for that. Obviously, they're going up to do something on a mountain. Maybe law enforcement needs to accompany them on these firefighting calls, and maybe they did, and we just don't know about it. I think we're just so early on. There are a lot of questions still to be answered.
I agree. And quite frankly, they may not have the resources, and that's okay too. That's absolutely understandable. And as you mentioned before, Canfield Mountain, this is a public trailhead. I don't know that they had any reason to believe that this could be a dangerous area where they needed the police and they needed a police escort. So again, I don't want to put any fault on the fire chief in any way, shape, or form. They are grieving. But at the same time, yes, maybe protocol does need to change. But the reality is that then slows down response time by firefighters. And that, incurs more property damage, more civilian damage, and that's problematic too. And so I think it's a weird line, right, that they are walking, but they may just have not had the resources or even thought that a police escort was needed on a call like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it came in, fire on the mountain.
Right.
They probably think somebody's out there doing something got out of hand, whatever happened, somebody could have flicked a cigarette butt or a cigarette, anything could have happened. And that was the furthest thing from their minds. So where we go from here, as far as I can tell, Tracy, is that they make a positive identification on the body. They verify, do an autopsy, verify who this person is, all of that stuff, cause of death, which officer or person shot and killed him. The sheriff was kind of desperate yesterday. He said, if you see this person and you can take a shot, take a shot. I mean, they were, you don't hear that too often, but he was like, hey, everybody out there, if you're armed and you see this person and you can get a clear shot, take him out.
That was unusual. I saw.
So that was kind of like, whoa. When I saw that, you knew the sheriff was in a tough spot.
It's, again, I hate, as former law enforcement, I don't like critiquing law enforcement because I don't know what I would do in a situation like this. We have to be careful when we're asking the public to take a shot. Listen, this is an area, as you mentioned, it's absolutely beautiful. A lot of people come there for that sort of quiet, open spaces, and they probably are armed. But I think the issue is when you advise the public to do that and engage in something like that, as you mentioned earlier, there could be a whole host of innocent people on this trail, and that can potentially be dangerous. Not to mention, you could have other law enforcement who's attempting to go into the trail caught in the crossfire. I have some concerns about letting the public engage.
Well, we will keep an eye on it. They're going to be going through this person's phone, the shooter's phone. They're going to be seeing who this person was talking to online and really doing a deep dive on the person's background to figure out what was going on. And thank God more people were not injured. We have a third firefighter fighting for his life. And my thoughts and prayers, I know you too, Tracy, go out to those who lost their lives fighting this fire that was a setup.
100%. They are risking their lives every day to keep us safe. Law enforcement is, firefighters are, and for this to happen is just absolutely devastating.
It truly is. Tracy Walder, thank you so much.
Thank you, Angenette.
And we'll continue to follow this breaking story for you. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.